Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be diving deep into Proxmox and figuring out how to really maximize its potential. Specifically, we're going to be looking at LXCs, VMs, and Docker with Portainer. So, how to choose between them and really make the most of Proxmox.
Yeah, the balancing act, right? You want the power, but you don't want to bog your system down.
Exactly. And to guide us on this deep dive, we have this PDF, Proxmox Resource Management, Understanding LXC, VMs, and Docker with Portainer. Catchy, right?
Definitely rolls right off the tongue.
So let's start by demystifying some of these terms. If you think of your Proxmox server as like a digital building, VMs are kind of like having your own private apartment in that building. Total control, your own operating system, your own apps. It's great for security and stability, but it can be a resource hog. It's like a big apartment.
It's like think of a standalone house versus an apartment, right? Both provide shelter, but the resource footprint and the management is totally different.
Now, on the flip side, we've got LXCs. Think of these as, sharing that big apartment with some roommates. You share some core resources, hard drive space, internet connection. This makes LXCs super lightweight and fast, but, you are sharing more than with a VM, which can impact security.
And this is key, right? The source material really emphasizes this trade-off. Isolation versus efficiency. VMs offer security and stability because of their dedicated resources. LXCs, they're leaner and faster, sure, but they might not be the best fit if you need super tight security.
Right, so if you're, say, running a small website or maybe experimenting with a new programming language, LXCs are great, but if you're dealing with, sensitive data, financial records, anything like that, you really want that VM security.
100%. You have to think about what you're trying to achieve with your server.
Okay, so we've covered VMs and LXCs. Now, what about Docker with Portainer? Imagine Docker as a system for packaging and running applications.
It's like, ooh, those meal kits, right? Everything you need, pre-portioned, ready to go. You get these pre-configured environments for your apps, making them super portable and easy to manage.
Streamlined for sure. And Portainer is like having a head chef to manage all those meal kits. It gives you this nice user-friendly interface to control and monitor your Docker containers. Makes life easier.
You mentioned wanting to run a small website and experiment with some machine learning stuff, right? Well, Docker could help you set up a web server environment super quick. No need to configure everything manually. And for the machine learning, you could use pre-built Docker images that already have all the libraries and dependencies you need.
Exactly. No more dependency conflicts, just a smoother workflow. Now, I know some folks are already familiar with virtual machines, but Docker, it brings some advantages to the table that traditional VMs don't. It's like Docker's giving you a whole prepped kitchen for every single dish you want to make, while a VM is like building a new kitchen every time you want to cook.
That's a good way to put it. And you mentioned earlier, making the most of your server resources. Well, this PDF, it really emphasizes this point. Docker containers, they're lightweight. They share your server's operating system kernel, so way less overhead compared to like a bunch of separate virtual machines.
So with Docker, I can run more applications on the same hardware and it won't slow to a crawl. That's pretty awesome.
Okay.
Okay, let's get practical here. We've covered the what of VMs, LXCs, and Docker, but I think it's time to talk about the when.
Totally. Choosing the right tool for the job, it all comes down to knowing the strengths and weaknesses of each technology. Say you're running a website with like a database backend. Now, you mentioned security being important.
Huge priority, yeah. Data security is not something to mess around with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can't stress that enough. So in this case, you'd probably put your database on a secure VM. Think of it like a digital vault inside your server.
Yeah.
Isolated, protected, configured specifically for that database.
So our database is locked down tight. What about the website itself?
Good question.
Yeah.
The website itself, it might not need the same level of security as, say, sensitive customer data. So this is where LXCs could be a good fit. They're lightweight, they're fast, perfect for, serving up web pages quickly.
So we're playing to the strength of each technology, right? Building a balanced and efficient server setup. And speaking of which, where does Docker fit into all of this? We can't forget about our convenient containers.
Right. Think about things like monitoring tools, logging systems, maybe even a mail server. These are often smaller, more lightweight applications that really benefit from Docker's, portability and ease of management. You could have these running as Docker containers, totally separate from your website and database, but still easy to manage through Portainer.
I'm really liking this whole hybrid approach. It's like combining the best of everything. But I have to admit, setting all this up, it sounds a little intimidating even with these explanations.
I get it. It can seem like a lot.
Right.
But Proxmox and tools like Portainer, they're designed to make it manageable. And
Hmm.
remember, you don't have to start with some crazy complex setup right away. You can start small, maybe one VM for your database, a couple of LXCs for your website, and then add Docker containers as you need them.
That's reassuring, actually. Start small, scale gradually. I like it. Okay, but let's say someone's ready to dive in and start building this amazing setup. One thing that often gets overlooked is choosing the right templates and images.
Oh, yeah, for sure. This is where things get real. And while our trusty PDF gives us a great overview, it doesn't really get into the weeds of like selecting and deploying those individual components.
It's like having the blueprints for a house, but needing to pick out like the right lumber and bricks and, actually build the thing. So, where do we even start with this? What should people be thinking about when choosing between, say, an LXC template, a VM image, or a Docker container? It's decision time. Do we go for that pre-built Ubuntu server image, or, get adventurous with a minimal Debian install? Decisions. Decisions.
Well, it all boils down to what you need, right? What's the project? It's like picking between a place that's already furnished or getting to decorate it yourself.
Ah,
Both have their perks.
I like that. Okay, so break it down for us. When we're trying to pick the right templates and images, what are the big things to keep in mind?
First off, think about what you're using the server for, its main purpose. If you're just dipping your toes into, like, web hosting, a beginner-friendly LXC template with a pre-configured web server might be perfect, easy to use, quick setup. But if you're talking about a super important database, you'd want something way more heavy-duty, something you can really customize.
So, like, takeout versus like a gourmet meal you make from scratch, different situations, different needs. What else should we be thinking about?
The operating system itself is important. Do you need a specific version of Linux for your apps? Sometimes software has, compatibility issues. You'll need to factor that in when you're picking your LXC template, VM image, or even your Docker container.
So, making sure everything plays nicely together.
Gotcha. And don't underestimate community support. Some images and templates are more popular, which means more documentation, more forum posts, more people to help if you hit a snag.
Right, because nothing's worse than hitting a wall and not knowing where to turn.
Or
So, we've got purpose, operating system, community support, anything else.
resource efficiency is key. Some images and templates are leaner than others, meaning they use fewer system resources. Might not be a big deal if you've got a super powerful server, but for those of us with, let's say, more modest setups, it makes a difference. Picking a lightweight option can really boost performance, especially if you're running a lot of services. Remember, we're all about squeezing every drop of performance out of that Proxmox server.
Okay, so that's the what of choosing these templates, images, and containers. But where do we even find them?
That's the great thing about Proxmox being open source and all options. Proxmox itself has a library of pre-built stuff right in its web interface. They keep it updated, and it covers a ton of operating systems and applications.
So I can just pop open the Proxmox web interface and start browsing?
Exactly. Think of it like an app store, but for your server. But it doesn't stop there. You can always check out online repositories and communities if you need something more specialized. Docker Hub for Docker images is a good one, and there are tons of forums and websites dedicated to Proxmox. But just a heads up.
There's always a but, isn't there? What's the catch with these external sources?
Just be careful where you download stuff from. It's like downloading software from like a sketchy website. Make sure the source is legit, check for reviews, things like that. You don't want to accidentally invite any security issues into your Proxmox setup.
Don't want any uninvited guests. So once we've found the perfect template, image, or container, how do we actually get it up and running on our server?
This is where Proxmox really shines. It's surprisingly straightforward.
Straightforward, huh? I tend to overcomplicate things.
Don't worry, Proxmox can handle it. Remember that web interface. That's your control center. You can upload images, choose templates, even deploy Docker containers, all pretty easily.
No need to dust off my command line skills. That's a relief. But for those who are new to this whole Proxmox thing, can you walk us through the process? Just the basics, of course.
Sure thing. Let's say you've found that Ubuntu server image you liked for a VM. You go to the Proxmox web interface, click to create a new VM, give it a name, something creative like My Ultimate Server, and then here's the key part. You point Proxmox to that image file you downloaded.
Like saying, hey, Proxmox, use these blueprints to build me my dream server.
Exactly. Proxmox takes that image and builds you a brand new virtual machine. You give it some resources like RAM and CPU power, do a bit of network configuration, and you're in business.
Not as painful as I thought it might be. What about LXCs and Docker containers? Same idea.
Pretty much. Proxmox has sections for creating LXCs and deploying Docker containers. With LXCs, you usually choose from a list of templates, picking your operating system version and any pre-installed software you want.
Even more streamlined than a VM since you're not dealing with a whole operating system image. Nice.
Exactly. And for Docker, you're basically just pointing Proxmox to the right Docker image, usually from Docker Hub, and letting it do its thing. You can even use Docker Compose files for multi-container applications if you want to get fancy.
Super efficient. But we keep mentioning network configuration. What does that actually involve and why is it so important?
Networking. The unsung hero of any good server setup. It's how your VMs, LXCs, and Docker containers talk to the outside world and to each other if you need them to. Proxmox gives you a lot of control over how your virtual environments access the network.
So setting up the infrastructure, making sure everything is connected properly.
Exactly. You'll usually assign IP addresses, set up firewalls to control the traffic flow, and maybe even configure port forwarding if you need services to be accessible from outside.
Okay, starting to understand why networking is so crucial. It's like the backbone of the whole operation.
Exactly. Proxmox gives you a lot of flexibility and control in this area, so you can build some pretty complex network setups if you need to.
Well, this has been quite a journey. We've covered VMs, LXCs, Docker with Portainer, the whole hybrid approach. We even dove into choosing templates and images and the wonderful world of networking.
We just scratched the surface. Proxmox is packed with features and customization. Always more to learn and explore.
And that's what makes it so exciting. But for now, we hope you feel equipped to make some smart decisions about your own Proxmox setup. Remember, the best way to learn is to dive in and experiment. So fire up those servers and see what you can create. Until next time, happy virtualizing.